hottest areas in technology, but also in IoT, is in transport. We have smart cars, we have smart roads, we have smart cities. It's the one thing that seems to be changing everything. I was over in Auckland a few months ago. They have turned the Auckland public transport system into a giant stateless computer. I'm not kidding you. This is how they manage it. This is how, and so there are some areas where we're really starting to think ahead about creating smart transport systems where we are. Tony Braxton-Smith is the Deputy Secretary for Customer Service, Transport New South Wales, where he works to apply customer insights to transport decisions. Please, let's welcome Tony.
Well, thank you and good morning. This morning I want to talk to you about how you can use the IoT to transform customer experience. And I'm going to look at that through the transport lens, through the mobility lens, because that's the sector I know. But in putting together this presentation, and indeed the thinking that's gone into our transport technology roadmap, what I hope you'll see is some frameworks and some strategic thinking that needs to be done wherever you are and whatever you're developing in working in your sector or your chosen field on the IoT. So, the Transport Technology Program, how can IoT improve our customer experience? We had a summit. We had a technology summit here about 18 months ago, and we got a lot of people in the room talking for 2 days about the future of transport and what technology could do to transform the customer experience. Out of that, we identified 12 different technologies or technology sets, emerging technology sets, and there was a lot of talk generated about it, about how they might develop in the course of the coming decade and how that might transform mobility. That was the start of us thinking about our transport technology roadmap and where we act next in order to bring technology to transform customer experience early. So in thinking through how we could take all of these technologies and apply them to mobility solutions that improve customer experience, one of the first things that we looked at was where in the value chain these technologies are likely to impact. And if you're a traditional person in the field of transport, then you'd be going straight to how mobility happens, the operational sphere. And indeed, there are things that can be done with the things that move us around, buses, cars, etc. There's tremendous change going on in each of those fields. But that's kind of the traditional transport value chain. And the opportunities that we see with all of these new and emerging technologies are across a much larger value chain. And this actually comes from the field of manufacturing. You know, manufacturing version 4.0, I think is what it's called. And in terms of looking to unlock value for our customers, we've actually set out in our transport technology roadmap a more embracing view that says, well, we can use these new technologies to better connect communities, yes, to transform service delivery, but also to improve the customer experience. And we will probably extract more value in the left-hand and right-hand side because that's where the opportunities are really arising for disruptive technologies to dramatically transform how we deliver service. And that's where we went looking as we started to think about our transport technology roadmap. Now, in the course of that, of course, there was a lot of talk, and there has been a lot of talk about all of these fabulous new technologies that you see in the news stories every week, and when you do a global environmental scan, they are everywhere. But in us thinking about where we go next, and I would suggest to you in thinking about where you go next, that you stand back from looking at the technology as we did, and instead think about this. Think about not what's technologically feasible, but what's actually desirable for your customers. Because what we did was we actually said, well, okay, there's all of these 12 different technologies floating around that we think from talking to a lot of smart people are probably going to be the ones that will dramatically change how mobility happens in the next decade. But really, what's it going to do? Because it's not disruptive technology, it's actually disruptive human behaviour. When people take new bits of technology and use them to do different things or behave in different ways. So the question we wanted to ask ourselves was, well, with all of these technologies around and emerging, what's desirable from a customer's point of view and how might individuals and groups of people collectively change their behaviour? And we used a particular lens to look at this. and I'm going to have to press the button again. We said to ourselves, well, let's think about the scenarios, because really, there's lots of people predicting things and forecasting that this might happen or that might happen. What are the possible scenarios for all of these different technologies? What is it going to be like through till 2030? And what are the things that we should be doing next? What stuff should we act on? And we actually talked about 4 different scenarios. This is, I think, the first one. And the second one. The first one. So this scenario is about autonomous vehicles. So everyone's talking about autonomous vehicles. So we envisage a scenario in which autonomous vehicle technology is rapidly developed. We ask ourselves, what does that mean in terms of individual behaviour, and what are the implications for our business, our sector, mobility overall? So if in one scenario, autonomous vehicles become ubiquitous, but we stick with the model of individual ownership, then we get to a scenario that we call my autonomous car is king. There will actually be more vehicles on the road doing more vehicle kilometres. In fact, the network will slow down because of the pressure on it and the demand for additional infrastructure, but people aren't going to care so much because they'll be in their autonomous vehicles doing stuff. So that's one scenario we envisaged. The second one we envisaged was actually autonomous vehicles in combination with the rise of the technologies that enable the sharing economy. And this one we called We're All In It Together, which is when aggregated demand, people free themselves from goods and they use shared and collective ownership to enable their mobility. Now, we actually had these two as kind of pretty dominant scenarios, but then talking to a group of youth at a youth summit, well, they said, well, what about public transport? What if all of the innovation happens in public transport because we actually think it's cool and that's how we'd like to move around come 2030? And that got us to another scenario called supercommuting using public transport. The fourth one was why travel so much? If all of these new and emerging technologies actually mean that people don't move so much because of e-learning and e-health and this and that and the other, then it's going to again change the way that mobility happens. But where we really got to with these was these are actually not different scenarios that are competing, they're 4 different use cases. And so you need to think about multiple scenarios and multiple use cases, and that's how we got to our transport technology roadmap. From that, we went to what we call a flexible strategic framework. And that flexible strategic framework was designed for us to think about how it is that if those were the 4 different scenarios, what are the things that we actually have to pursue in order for us to be able to act sensibly on things that will add value in the near term. So we actually identified 5 different strategic levers on which we could act, and I've got them up there in the interests of time. I'm not going to read them out, but you can see them for yourselves, and these slides are available online if you want to download them afterwards. But we came up with a flexible strategic framework on which we could act irrespective of which scenario arises and which would add value and improve the customer experience. And the biggest single one is about personalising transport for our customers. Let me show you how we actually get to that, because what we said is, okay, if that is going to be our strategic framework, what are the next things that we can act on that are no regrets, not because they're dead certs. In fact, as we know, you have to take risks, you have to be able to fail fast and move forward, and what are the initiatives that are going to, if successful, definitely add value to our customers and be of enduring value in a future which is transformed by new technologies. So, out of that, we then identified a technology roadmap which has got in total 15 initiatives. So the 15 initiatives are in the 5 different areas, 5 different strategic levers. We kind of identified 3 specific interest areas where we think there is rich opportunity. So again, in personalising, and I'll just use it as an example, in personalising customer interaction, we said, okay, well, let's take our payment platform as it sits today, Opal, and let's take our journey planners and all of the other platforms that our customers use, and they use them multiply. I think of the experience that I have when I want to get to the station to catch the train to the airport, I actually use 3 or 4 different apps. What if I could go to one place for all of that to occur? So we've seen a world in which there is convergence and simplification for customers, and we've identified 3 particular areas that we want to act because we know they will add value. Likewise, we've gone through each of the 5 different strategies, and for a technology roadmap, identified the key interest areas. And these 15 interest areas now for this year and next year constitute where we are investing our time, effort, resource on ventures and trials and pilots at small scale to see what might happen. And again, it's using the concept of the minimum viable product, the minimum viable use case, doing a trial, prototyping, testing, seeing what we can learn, and then taking the next step. A couple of those areas for yourselves that might offer rich opportunity are things like in transforming the mass transit network. We're saying, okay, well, we actually want to use analytics to optimise end-to-end customer journeys. Like, you know, we think about all of those wonderful technologies that are going to transform the rail network or the bus network, the operational technologies. All of the manufacturers are going to solve that problem for us, but we are the network manager and the network owner, and that's going to be our role in government for a period of time, the network regulator. And so how could we optimise the network for the benefit of our customers? Now, there's rich opportunities there using IoT. What they are, we leave it to others, and we've gone into very much a partnering arrangement. We'll leave it to others to work with us to develop small trials that we can pilot, using transport and our transport network as one gigantic petri dish to see what would happen using these new technologies. And then if they work, we want to scale them up. We're trialling, for instance, at the moment, in shared demand responsive services. We're trialling a whole bundle of shared services, 10 different pilots in different parts of Sydney, where instead of you waiting for a bus that comes on a fixed timetable to a fixed location, you can actually order your transport service on demand. As the Minister says, I can get my pizza on demand, I can get my movies on demand, why can't I have my transport on demand? So, and indeed, personalising transport would suggest that you've got to go in that particular direction. So, we're trialling there. We're looking at how people react and respond to services that are offered like that. And then we're thinking about the technology applications that sit behind it, such that if we get to a point when we scale up, through a number of the different areas of interest on the roadmap, we'll have convergence and we'll be able to actually scale up and roll out quite rapidly. So we've got a set of no regrets next steps initiatives, which are our 15 focus areas. The key thing for us then is how do we manage the technology stack? The previous speaker put up a view of a technology stack, which for me was quite interesting. We actually spent a little bit of time thinking, because we're in a large, complex organisation, thinking about, well, all of the different layers and strands of technology, how's it all going to fit together if we're going to personalise transport? And this is the view that we actually came to, which is a slightly different way of looking at a technology stack. So first of all, at the base of it, if you like, in order to personalise transport for our customers, we've got to continue to upgrade our enterprise technology platforms. You know, the network system, you took 4G, 5G, whatever those enterprise technology platforms are that we use. And we need to expand and adopt the use of advanced operational technology. So you only have to kind of walk down the street to know that we're in effect digging the joint up. We're building a new light rail, we're building the light rail to new contemporary product specifications, not the ones back in the 90s or the 80s. Likewise, a new metro, you know, new contemporary product specifications. So we're looking now to go to the adoption of advanced technologies in our operational fields to actually run the core of our business. But there's a lot more that we have to do because we've got an existing network and a legacy system. And this is kind of the stuff in the middle, which is where I think you guys operate and you guys understand better than I do, which is what I like to think of as the connective tissue that enables us to connect with our customers and deliver outcomes that customers care about. So there are kind of 4 areas for us of alignment. First of all, you know, we have, in fact, a network already of sensors. They're called the traffic light system. And they sense and they respond and they actuate. But we're going to have to relay that network or connect it better or overlay it. And we're going to have to digitise all of our assets and our processes. Now, we can't do all that at once, so we have to think strategically about what first and why, or what next and why. So then the next layer becomes important because it's the data that comes out of that that's important. It's actually the material that lubricates the whole system. So we are configuring, connecting, organising and opening up our data to generate mass data sets. There's a variety of them on our open data platform. I think we've got thousands now of subscribers there, hundreds of data sets that people play with. They produce different applications with, they do little trials and experiments on. And if someone comes to us and says, hey, I've got this idea, but I need this data set from you, then we'll have a very constructive conversation about how we might help that. So we want to open up data and expand the real-time capability of the system, and we want to deploy analytics, AI, machine learning, whatever the kind of the new name is for it, where instead of, as it happens now in many of our control centres, you have all of this information come into a room with a wall of screens on it, with a lot of smart and very harried people acting cool, calm and collected as they make decisions about the transport network. We say, oh, well, there's got to be a better way to use augmented intelligence to improve decision-making and management capacity. So deploy data analytics and augmented intelligence. And then if we're going to, again, personalise transport, then we've got two more things to do, which is to develop a dynamic demand management and capacity allocation system and then connect to the customer. So this is kind of our view of how we look at the technology map and the technology layers. And I think I know we have adopted the new mantra of not seeking to project manage it all, but in fact to broker across technology layers and with a number of players various solutions, first in trials and small scale pilots, but then to integrate them and orchestrate their operation in our system. So we're adopting the new mantra of working together collectively across these technology stacks with a number of different players. Now, at the end of it, you get into the tech space, but you've got to ensure that there are clear customer outcomes. So we've gone through a process of just reconciling back and saying, well, here are our 4 scenarios, or our 4 future scenarios, or our 4 use cases. Here are the strategies that we're actually going to act on next, and the specific focus areas where we will conduct our experiments to see what works and then scale up. And we have to make sure that we look for the customer outcomes. In the transport area, the customer outcomes that speak to customer desirability are down that side of the page. You can see them there, no need to read them out. You yourself would know that you want quick, easy, convenient transport, personalised and adapted to your needs. So that ultimately is our objective and how we manage the whole program. And when we look at an opportunity, this is the lens that we ultimately assess it through. I've said previously, where it takes us, we can't be quite sure. But we do know that if by applying this particular framework, that we are going to be able to deliver benefits from harnessing the potential of these new technologies quicker and faster for our customers. Thank you.